Have you ever wondered what would happen if, while getting into your car, you found yourself trapped in a cycle from which you could not escape, where every passenger you picked up was destined to die violently and tragically? This is the story of an Uber driver, an ordinary man whose fate intertwines with horror and tragedy, a cycle from which he cannot break free. His story begins like any other, navigating the streets of a city that seems familiar, yet beneath it lies dark secrets. Every day, he picks up strangers, brief stories, unknown faces that often fade from his memory as soon as he drops them off at their destination. However, everything changes when his vehicle, a tool of his trade, turns into a terrifying prison. The day everything began, Jake, an experienced driver, felt an odd sense of unease as he entered his car. The streets were emptier than usual, and the air felt heavy, as if the world were holding its breath. His first passenger, a young woman named Lisa, seemed anxious as the road stretched before them. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. When they arrived at the destination, he said goodbye to Lisa, but before she could exit the car, a deafening crash echoed in the air, and in an instant, Lisa's life was violently extinguished before his eyes. Jake, paralyzed by horror, struggled to understand what had just happened, but the experience left a mark on him. He decided that he would not pick up any more passengers, that he would stop and seek help. But as soon as he made the decision, the car came to life on its own. The steering wheel began to turn, and in an instant, he found himself dragged back onto the road, forced to pick up his next passenger. Trapped in a cycle of horror, Jake witnessed each of the tragic fates awaiting the passengers he picked up, from a man nervously heading to a date who was struck by a train, to a mother who would never return from taking her child to school. Each death was more shocking than the last, a reminder of the terror lurking around every corner of life. At first, he thought he could break the cycle by refusing to pick up anyone, but the car simply drove him to a new destination, one where death lurked at every turn. In his desperation, Jake began to blame himself, feeling increasingly trapped by a past he could not remember, yet which haunted him with relentless force. It was as if the car were alive, as if every roaring engine and turn of its wheels were fueled by the souls of the victims he had collected. However, he was not only experiencing their deaths, he was living the lives of those passengers, feeling their fears, their desires, and, above all, their pain. As the days blurred, Jake started to understand that each death he witnessed was connected to a fragment of his own story, one he had forgotten in some dark corner of his mind. With each new day, each new passenger who boarded, Jake spiraled deeper into madness. He tried to remain calm, to remember who he was before all of this began, but his mind was filled with screams and echoes of those who had died by his side. It was then that he began searching for answers. He needed to understand the reason behind this nightmare. With every passenger he picked up, he asked subtle questions, trying to decipher the connection he had with them. However, the hopelessness grew as he realized that every answer he received only plunged him further into confusion. One night, after having been behind the wheel for hours, he picked up an elderly man who seemed to know much more than he revealed. The old man told him that the connection was not only physical but spiritual. The souls of those who had died in the car were trapped, seeking release through understanding and forgiveness. Jake felt the air leave his lungs, the anguish wrapping around him in a cold embrace. If those souls needed redemption, could he be the key to freeing all those who had died in his car, including his own soul from a past life? As his car guided him to new destinations, Jake felt increasingly unable to make decisions, as if he were being manipulated by a force beyond his understanding. But the idea of freeing himself and those tormented souls began to take shape. One day, while picking up a passenger heading to a birthday party, he realized he could not allow innocence to become another tragic fate. He was determined to stop the cycle. Throughout the ride, his mind raced with multiple plans, ways to break the curse. Finally, they arrived at their destination, and in a desperate act, he stopped in the middle of the road. The young woman was frightened, asking him what he was doing, but it was too late. In that split second, an out-of-control truck was approaching. Without thinking, Jake took the wheel and made a sharp turn, managing to steer the car away from the truck's path. But the collision was inevitable, and the impact was brutal. In an instant, he felt everything fade away, as if time itself had stopped. He awoke in a dense darkness, surrounded by murmurs and laments. The souls were there, all of them, trapped in an intermediate space between life and death. Jake understood that each one of them looked at him with eyes full of hope. In that moment, he realized there was more at stake than his own life. He was the guardian of lost souls. He had to confront his own guilt to free them from their chains. With each story he heard, he realized he had not just been a driver. He had been a witness, a mediator. So, with every word he spoke, he sought redemption. By sharing his own story of life and pain, he began to transform their laments into whispers of peace. Slowly, the souls began to be released, disappearing into a bright light that enveloped everything around them. He knew he had managed to break the cycle, that he had finally freed those who had felt trapped. But in that process, he also realized he could not escape his own destiny. As the light slowly faded, Jake felt his own soul separating from the car. The city lights returned, and with them, life and movement. But as he traveled through the fog, he understood the truth of his existence. He had not just been a driver. He had been a guardian angel in a world filled with shadows. While his life had ended, his journey had only just begun. And in the end, every passenger he had picked up would be part of his story. Even if their deaths had been tragic, their legacy would live on in every corner of memory. And so, through a collision of time and destiny, Jake found his own liberation, a mix of terror and hope that would resonate forever in the echo of his journey. If you ever find yourself driving in the dark and a shadow crosses your path, remember that sometimes destinies intertwine beyond what one can imagine. Don't forget to leave your like, share your thoughts in the comments, and follow the channel for more stories that will keep you awake at night.